welcome to another edition of You Can Get There From Here. I'm Dr. Joe Moore, Chair of the Department of Communication and Digital Media Production at the University of Central Missouri, and it's my pleasure every week to get to sit down and visit with some of our alumni. I talk to those who graduated with degrees in digital media production, others who got their bachelor's degree in communication studies, and some who got a master's degree. Today is just such a day. We are visiting with Valerie Melton Morrow, who earned her master's degree in 2012 in communication. She was also a graduate assistant on the Talking Mule speech and debate team. And Valerie, how are you? I am so excited to see you today.
I'm so excited to chat with you. I'm really well. Yeah,
Good.
it's fun to get to reconnect and to go down memory lane a little bit with you.
Well, we got to catch up a little bit before we came on air and hearing about your kiddos. And I had in my head that you had two under five, and nope, they're 6 and 9. I cannot believe how time flies.
Time flies.
Yep. Are they doing good?
They're doing great. Yep. Lots of fun, lots of energy in the house, lots of good life, lots of
Your
life lessons on both sides.
your kids with lots of energy. I can't believe it.
I made them and I like them. That's what I tell myself some days.
Very good. You have to give yourself that reminder every once in a while. A little
Mhm.
pep talk. Yeah.
Little pep talk.
Well, Valerie, start off with tell us where you're from. Tell us what brought you here to UCM and kind of a little bit about what you're doing today.
Yeah. So I grew up Southwest Missouri, right in between Springfield and Joplin in a little town called Mount Vernon, Missouri. And I started doing speech and debate when I was a freshman in high school and continued doing that in college at Missouri Southern in Joplin. And then the summer between my junior and senior year was approached by Art Reynolds and Jack Rogers about coming to UCM to be a graduate assistant to coach the debate team and get my master's at the same time. And so getting a master's was not on my radar, not something that I necessarily knew that I wanted to pursue, but would not trade those 2 years for anything in the whole world. So it was a really fun time, really impactful, and led me into my career. So that was 2010, 2011, 2012, graduated in 2012. So have done 15 years in digital marketing. Currently am the director of social media at Dairy Farmers of America. So they are the nation's largest global dairy cooperative. So we're owned by 9,500 family farm owners, and they produce milk and we find a home for it and sell it. And I get the pleasure of telling their stories across all different channels on social media, and have been doing that for almost 7 years here at DFA.
So we almost were at schools together twice because I was at Missouri Southern. I left there in 2002 to
Okay.
come here to UCM, and you
Yep.
got to Missouri Southern, and I'm figuring the numbers here about 2004. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. 2005, 2006 is when I started there. Yeah, and that was on a scholarship for debate as well. So debate was so key in, I think, finding my voice and knowing. We always joked when I was little, what do you want to do? And I said, I just want somebody to pay me to talk. And so, my dad was always like, we got to find the thing that you're really passionate about talking about and that somebody will pay you to talk about. And so it's been fun over the years to try to find those places and spaces, and try to bring value.
Now, did you come from a farm background? So
I
that
did
when you,
not come from a farm
okay,
background. So I came, the ag connection for me was growing up in rural Southwest Missouri, especially with public speaking background. I always tried to be recruited into 4-H and FFA and loved what they were doing, but just went a different path with speech and debate. But just always appreciated and was always around rural and ag families. And I think just inherently always saw how hard they worked and what life was like for them. And so when I saw this position on LinkedIn, it was kind of the best of both worlds of social media, of farm, of telling stories. And I think even before I got here, I had done social media work at a couple of other different places. I had a stint at an agency, which was really key in my journey. And through that, I learned that in order to be able to tell stories in different but repeatable ways, you really had to believe in what you were selling, so to speak, but also in just the vision that you were trying to bring to life, in the angles and all of the different things that you were trying to capture, I had to really believe in it. And so being at a place for 7 years in social media is kind of like dog years. It's like, wow, you've been at the same place for 42 years. And it's just because you fall in love with it and you find new ways to tell the same story in different ways. And my 92-year-old grandma, whenever we talk about work, she always asks me, are you learning and are you still having fun? And I
That's
think
a
those are
great
great questions to
philosophy.
ask yourself in your
Yeah.
career. Are you learning and are you still having fun? And, even 15 years later, still learning and still having fun.
Well, we're gonna get to the social media part in a minute because I'm
Yeah,
sure you are still learning the way that thing keeps turning over and that we get new
always.
platforms and such. When you were in grad school, your focus was on organizational and corporate communication, right? And your bachelor's, I believe, was in PR. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So what was the ultimate goal when you were in your undergrad at Southern and then when you came here for your master's to do and study in corporate and organizational comm?
Yeah. So I always knew that I wanted to do something communications and something business. And what I found at UCM was the way to connect the two of those. So I like to think about it as kind of that Venn diagram of here's what I want to do, and here is what I am good at, and what is that skinny shaded space of where those things come together, and ultimately what I find passion in and what people have value for. And so the program really helped me ask the right kinds of questions as I was, and I'm also a golfer, so you'll hear some golf metaphors in there too. Like, as I was teeing up my career, trying to think about what I wanted to do, but also what needs did businesses have. And when I sat down to start thinking about my thesis route, that's where the skinny shaded area started to come into more of a focus. And so I actually went and talked to some business leaders. I thought about where business and communication was going. And I said, over the next 10 years, because at the time, 10 years felt like a long time. And here we are more than 10 years later. 10 years later, like, what is a communication challenge that businesses are going to have? And how can I be part of that solution? And so at the time, social media as a business communication tool and channel was really starting to emerge. And so being on the precipice and pioneering and understanding with confidence what is coming next or what is underutilized when you think about business and communication, public relations, all of those types of things. And so social media, I found in business leaders' minds at the time, was loud, it was scary, it was uncharted, but they also saw the opportunity and the power that it could bring to amplify a business's message. And so that's really where I locked in and locked on and said, this is what I'm going to make essentially my life's work.
And you did your thesis on social media. Tell us
And
about
I
your thesis.
Yeah, so my thesis was really interesting.
You had a
If
great
you
committee for it, by the way.
if I was gonna say my committee is what made it so great. No, if you remember, it was you and it was Jack and it was Art, and I did a thematic analysis. So it was right when the department went in such a smart move of there were actually two different tracks. So I was in that first class where there was the thesis track and there was the practical track. And going back now, obviously 15 years later, I may have ended up doing the professional track and doing more of the portfolio, but to be able to do a theoretical deep dive on something that was new and emerging actually gave me a leg up when I went to go talk to these companies, because I not only understood how I would apply it practically, I also was able to connect it to the theory of just how people communicate. So I ended up doing this thematic analysis. I read a disgusting amount of books and articles and pages and tried to bring all of those things together that says, here is some triangulation between what everybody's talking about in this space. And I actually put together, again, it was a little bit more of a practical tool, but a tool that businesses could use if they were just starting out in social media and they wanted to launch this thing from the ground up and they wanted to do it right. Here's some rules of engagement. And so almost wrote the playbook that I ended up, taking and shopping around to the businesses that I helped start their social media or grow. When it was a place where people saw opportunities, but the leaders of organizations at the time didn't have confidence to do that themselves. And so it added value for me, and it also gave them another place in their tool belt of bringing something to their organization that nobody else had.
Well, let's talk about the organizations you worked with. I see you had you were interested in social media all the way back to your grad school, like
Yeah,
days, like you said. I love that you developed a playbook for them, and you were able to use that practically to shop yourself out there. You were at Grantham University, Concord Career Colleges, Rivet. That was the agency you were with, right?
that was the agency. Yep.
Okay, and now you're with the Dairy Farmers of America. What is a day to day like for a social media manager, and what platforms are you using?
Yeah. So as I've grown in my career, I've also been blessed to be part of organizations who understand and see the value of social media. And so, with that, I have been at every one of those stops. I've gone from a team of one to now I lead a team. So, my day to day is much different from when I started and I was more in the weeds. There are days where I still roll up my sleeves and get in the weeds with my team, but I have a team of people who have really specific roles and responsibilities. And so I get to think more along the lines of strategy, of really looking at the full calendar of what we can talk about, of the platforms that we should be on, really how we're taking the messaging and telling consistent, connected stories across each one of those. And also, how do we take stories that we're creating in the social space and amplify those across the entire business, and how do we do that in new and exciting ways. So when I came, it was you got to work with what you got, and now it has been if I can continue to pitch plans and ideas and ask for resources, but to do that in a way where it makes sense for a business case, then I get to do that. So while I'm in a lot of meetings, I'm always thinking about the day-to-day of my team and of what's going to strengthen them, but also how do we do that in a way where we're working smarter and not harder. And so a good example of that is 2, 3 years ago, we said video is what everybody is craving and what gets you the most points on these platforms, right? But all of our farmers are scattered across the country. We've got, almost 10,000 of these farmers. Can we find 10 where we can work with them as content creators instead of
Have the farmers
influencers,
be the
which
content have the
let
farmers
the
be the content
farmers be
creators?
the content
Okay.
creators, right? Like we're tasked with telling their stories, but who's better to tell the stories than the people that are living it, right?
Right.
And to humanize a brand that is big, that's vast, that people don't fully understand, and so really brought the voice of the cooperative back to the people who own it. And
Hmm.
so it's been really fun over the last several years to get more into the video realm of working with this very small but focused group. Again, dairy farming is their full-time job, but they've also got the ability to get on, and so we've had a ton of fun creating educational videos, creating entertainment videos, and they're starting to come through with a little bit of like their niche in terms of I really love the trending sounds with lip syncing,
Yeah.
or I'm really good at taking a complicated topic and explaining it, or we just had it's winter, so their farms are getting out their little calf jackets, and so we did like a who wore it better, where a farmer strutting around in their Carhartt, and then we cut to a little calf that is jumping around, and we're able to educate people on calf care in the winter. And so it's those types of things where I get to either listen to a trending sound or see where a platform is going and say, how do we be a part of that? Where is the intersection between what we want to talk about and what we need to talk about and what people online want to see and encounter? So that could be something educational, it could be something entertaining, it could be something inspirational. And so thinking about, do we have a right mix of all of those stories?
So you're more B2B, right? I mean, business to business. You're not really trying to recruit new people into it, correct?
We're not recruiting new people into it, but our audience is consumers. And so it's either dairy consumers, so people who are already drinking milk and eating dairy, or kind of what we call the swing voters, like the people who probably like you and I grew up drinking and eating dairy, but now it's a very scattered beverage and food landscape. There's a lot of misinformation and messaging. And so how do we put out consistent messaging that allows people to feel confident about consuming dairy products and supporting dairy farmers and being part of what it means to support the agricultural community?
That's really cool. And I'm going to go back to what your grandmother said. You're having fun. It really
Yeah.
sounds like you're having a lot of fun. And it's social media. And, when I started in the profession, the first social media I remember is MySpace. And it went nowhere. And then it was Facebook. Well, now Facebook is not the preferred platform, I guess you would say, for a lot of people, although Facebook and YouTube still are the leaders.
Yep.
Um, but I mean, TikTok came along and you had Snapchat and Reddit and LinkedIn and whatever platform you're using. Is that a lot of the learning that you're doing is constantly having to learn these new platforms and who the audience is and how to use them best?
Yeah. Yes to all of the above. And then I also think it's creating the understanding and awareness of, and I love to tell people, whether it's courses that I'm teaching when I go to conferences or even at the organization that I'm at now, is just because a platform exists doesn't mean that your business or your brand has to be on it. And so you have to be there for the right reason. Is the audience there? Do you have the resources to do it well? Do you have the content to engage with the type of content that people want on those platforms? And if the answer is no, it's is that something that we need to build into, or is that something that we let go by? It's very similar to trends that you see and brands that you get on. So a good example is, Taylor Swift's new album comes out and every brand is turning every part of their world orange. Is that a fit for us? Is that something that we invest time in and that's impactful? Or, do we let that, what I say to my team often, like, do we let that flow down the river? And so it's learning, which ones are worth your time. How are you stewarding the audience? Do you go for breadth? Do you go for depth? Where are you investing, your resources monetarily and time wise and energy and copy and creative and all of those types of things? So being really focused and then helping business leaders understand how social media plays a role in quantifying that, right? We don't sell anything directly, so we don't have sales that we can attribute, or we're not, to your earlier point, bringing in new dairy farmers, so we don't have lead numbers. So a lot of my job too is taking, how is a video that has two farmers dancing to an overlay of minions with rolls of toilet paper on their eyes in a barn, right? That just got a 500,000 views, completely unpaid. Where, like, how do I quantify the value in that? And so sometimes it's thinking about that, understanding the value, being able to articulate that, and then being able to, put it in an email or a presentation and continuing to do that over and over again so that they understand, yes, sometimes it may be silly, but that there really is value in how we're connecting and how we're helping people, understand the messages that we're trying to convey to them.
How is AI playing into all of this?
Mm, we're actually using AI in some ways and we're rejecting AI in other ways. And so as AI becomes more prevalent in the social stream, people are going back to, just like we see with how people are eating, right? People are going back to what is real and what is wholesome. And we're trying to balance where AI helps us work faster, smarter, better, more on the conceptual side and less on the do the visual side for us, because you're going to start to get just that. They call it AI slop of, where it's just content, content, content. And so content that feels real, that feels well done, but not too perfect, that's what's going to cut through all of this noise, right? And I've talked about social noise for years. This is a completely different kind of social noise, right? Where it talks about, just the quantity. And I think that's where we go back to the conversation of how do we honor quality and how do we honor authenticity. And so that's why, whether it's, podcast clips or voices or videos that really go back to showing real people, that's what's going to come to the top and win the day in 2026, no doubt.
And I'm hearing all of these things that, and I want you to speak to it, but I'm hearing diffusion of innovation. You have to think about the innovations and what we can do, what we can't do. Should we develop the skills to be able to do this, or is this one we just let go by because it's a new platform? Do we have to be on that one? We're looking
Mhm.
at our audience. We're looking at content creation. All of these things that I'm picking out of my brain the classes where we teach those things, the activities where we
Yeah.
teach those things. Talk about your career here at UCM and what skills you took, what knowledge you took from your classes and your activities that helped prepare you for today.
Yeah. One of the things that I really loved about the course schedule in particular was that it had enough structure to create focus, but it also left enough room for flexibility to be able to build the future that you wanted to step into. And it allowed it wasn't so pretentious that we were only talking to ourselves. It allowed the ability to go and to take classes in different departments. That's something for current students that I cannot express enough how important it is to create the path and the program that you want. If there is a class that makes sense to pull in from this discipline, work with your advisor and figure out a way to do it. I asked a lot of questions because I was doing new and emerging technology that hadn't been asked yet. And sometimes it was we don't have an answer and we need to go into a meeting and we'll get back to you. And that's okay. But I think it's taking that and really looking at your electives and not just saying, these are things that interest me, but these are things that really make that whole person approach, or it takes all of the things that I am interested in because it's moving towards this one singular goal. And so the flexibility of being able to do that while also having a couple of those core classes that maybe at the time I didn't really understand why I was taking them, but the amount of times that I have gone back to the theoretical classes that I took, they were just as important as the practical, because when you can really layer those next to each other, you have not only the what and the how, but you also have the why behind it. And that was a really key differentiator, whether it was an idea that I was pitching or a plan that I was hoping to grow into, was being able to help people see not just the what was possible, but why it mattered.
I love that you said that because that's one of those things. I teach typically in digital media production, and so much of what we do, students can find a YouTube video that shows them
Yeah.
how to do that. And I'm always like, that's great. But why are they doing that? And what is the impact that it's going to have? And maybe they need to be tweaking it this way if they want to reach the maximum audience. So to hear you say that, and it just, I love one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast is to show to our current students and potential students the possibilities. I mean, I never would have thought of going into social media for the dairy farmers of America. And all I can picture now is my wife's grandfather, who was a farmer, with big googly eyes dancing to the minutes, or breaking down to a trend of Uptown Funk or
Yep.
something like. And what fun that would be, and how you can share the message that way. So I guess that brings me to my next question. What is your why? Why do
Yeah.
you do what you do?
Yeah. I have always loved talking. You can ask my parents, you can ask
Oh, I
anybody
remember. I
that
remember.
that has been around you, right? But the why for me is that if I can find a place, and I found that at Dairy Farmers of America, right, of people who are really passionate about what they do and they do that really well. And there are so many stories that deserve to be told. And we learned, even in the program 15 years ago, about media and about how stories are chosen and which ones make the news and which ones, at the time made the front page and which ones get on YouTube and Google. And it's providing the right information at the right time to the right people in the right way. And really being able to blend and bring all of those together, that gets me excited every day, of being able to support these families who, some of them are first generation and some of them are seventh generation. And they wake up every day and they do really hard work of getting up. And, we always have a joke at our house of when there's just like this much milk in the glass left, and you're like, I'm just going to throw that out, down the drain or whatever. The kids will say, don't waste the cowie's hard work. And, and it's honoring the hard work. And when I talk to them, they always say, gosh, like, you really love your job, don't you? And I say, I really love my job. And they say, I'm really glad that I don't have your job. And I say, I'm really glad I don't have your job. And just that mutual respect for, I'm really glad that there is a person who loves what they do, who is excited about what they're doing today, but is also thinking about what is possible for tomorrow. That's a really exciting place to be. It's a privilege, and it's one that, keeps you going even on the days where you're fighting with vegans online.
That What an incredible segue, Valerie, because my next question was going to be the university's new slogan is redefining what's possible. What does that mean to you?
I think redefining what's possible is thinking about the value that you can bring tomorrow and how you can prepare to do that today. I think when I went to UCM, it the slogan was something along the lines of, you're a name and not a number. And that was very much my lived experience, right? Where I was part of a group, I was part of a community, that, still engages and supports each other today. And when I think about thinking about, and reimagining what's possible, it's looking at what is required in your program, but also what is that broader view, and how can you really think about what it is that you want to step into, and creating that path through great coursework, through meeting with your advisor, through the right internships, by asking the right questions. I challenge my team all the time. One of their goals every year is to be consciously curious. And I think approaching your education with curiosity and always asking, not just, what do I need to do to finish this semester, or what do I need to do to get a passing grade, but where is this all going? And doing that work up front. It doesn't have to be perfect. I think more and more we're seeing that your career journey is never just vertical, right? It's got some lateral, it's got some flat tires on the side of the road. And so being okay with that, it's both a destination and a journey, but really taking control of the journey and not letting a course syllabus be your autopilot. But really thinking about, where is it that I want to go and what do I strategically need to do to get there, and asking questions along the way. What is possible?
Well, Valerie, this has been a fantastic conversation. I have loved hearing about what you're doing now, the team that you're working with, the way you're continuing to grow and learn, and the work that you're doing for, quite frankly, some really, really important people in our communities. So, my last couple of questions then are for you to take your experience, your knowledge, what you've learned along the way, and give some advice. What would you tell to somebody who is currently a UCM student in communication? And what advice would you give to somebody who's thinking about UCM to further their career?
If you are a current student, I could not be more pleased that they are going in the what's possible. I think asking great questions, being consciously curious, being
I like that.
courageous enough to ask questions that you don't know the answer to people who do know the answer or who might know the answer. I think from both the staff side and the faculty, if they don't know the answer, they know somebody who does.
Mhm.
And so just really asking good questions, thinking about not just the today but the tomorrow. Where do you want to be, and what do you think you need to get there? And that was something that was so helpful in my master's program, of having really good faculty that offered healthy challenge. They didn't always just say, that sounds like a great idea, go find that. They asked some really hard questions. And so being open to really hard questions, looking outside of just Martin and what's happening there, but getting involved in, other places on campus and thinking about what other disciplines are doing, that's huge in creating a full experience that's really going to help solidify exactly what it is you're going for. Because when you're just in that same building, in the same classes, you can be like, this is where I go, this is my home, this is my seat, but there's a whole world on campus that you have not even engaged or interacted with. So just giving yourself the freedom to go outside of the building in which we take classes and experiencing the fullness of campus.
Don't get into autopilot. Just come into Martin and Wood and take
Right?
get out there.
Yes.
We got a
Get
beautiful
out
campus.
there.
Experience it.
Get out there, right? And I mean, play with your craft along the way, right? Figure out what is missing, or what do you think you could add. That was something too that just along the way, from whether it was in forensics and debate, or whether it was teaching classes, of if you have an idea, there are people that are excited to come alongside. I think that was one of the things that I always loved, was that the faculty are equally as involved and equally as committed to being lifelong learners. And so whether it was somebody who was working on a book, or launching a podcast, or doing their own research, asking, how can I be a part of that? Where is there a place for me in either supporting your work, or doing something that is part of my program or my heart, and getting some real world practical experience, so you don't have to wait to start your career, to wait, until you have the diploma hanging on the wall that says you're somehow certified. And so I think that would be my advice to current students. And then future students, there's no place like Warrensburg. I've driven through it a couple of times since I've graduated, and I feel like the little old lady, and I'm like, y'all don't know how good you have it. So it's growing, and it's growing for all the right reasons. And it's a great place to do life. It's a great place to get a quality education. It's not one where you're dumping money and asking, what is this all going toward? It's an actual investment in you and in your future. And higher education still matters, in all of the YouTube and AI and GPT. It still matters.
Yeah.
And it's still valuable in the real world.
We're going to teach you that why. You can learn how to do the what, you can learn the
Yep.
how, but we're going to show you the why and how to make it work the best. So
Yeah.
Valerie, thank you so much for being here. It's been great catching up with you. I'm so proud of what you're doing and the work you're doing, and proving that idea of lifelong learning and loving what you do. Keep up the good work, and good luck with those kiddos.
Thanks. I need it.
And thanks all of you for tuning in today. Remember, you can catch every episode on our YouTube channel through the UCM Media Network. That's youtube.com/UCMMN. You can also listen on Spotify. Special thanks to Jake Mager for creating our theme music for us. Again, this is Dr. Joe Moore reminding you, you can get there from here. Have a great day.